Welcome to Wisdom Wednesday. I'm your host today, Hughena Brennan, the CEO with Veritasa Law, and I'm here to talk about what is the cost of a bad decision. We'll talk about legal misconceptions and myths, but I want to preface this to say I am not a lawyer and that anything you hear today that piques your interest, to please consult your legal counsel to ensure how it applies to you specifically. And I'll be providing just an overview of information to help you think about topics that will help you make better decisions for your business moving forward. So let's talk about what's the cost of a bad decision. So we're going to delve into the intricacies of a bad decision, and we'll also address some of these myths that can create challenges for your business, affecting your leadership, affecting your employees, and the decisions that you're making and the strategic choices that you're making for your business that can impact the solvency overall of your business. I'll also talk about some frameworks that you'll be able to utilize to help you make better decisions. Some people make decisions purely on their gut feeling, ignoring facts, which can be very dangerous, and in some cases it could be very sound. Gut feelings are actually kind of like inklings that's really coming from your subconscious, which is past learned lessons that you've learned along the way in business. So let's delve into this for a little bit. I'm sure you all believe you make a lot of decisions, and there are some days that you feel like you're making too many decisions. Particularly if you're running a business, you're getting bombarded with questions all the time. Well, the typical person makes 2,000 decisions every waking hour. And when you think about that, look at the number of decisions you've made today alone. From the time you got up this morning, when you were getting up, what you were going to do, whether you were hitting that snooze button or whether you were jumping in the shower and getting on with your day. Multiple decisions are automatic decisions or routine that you adopt. But we're not going to be focusing on the automatic, other than to say getting some decisions in your business to become automated, getting some of your decisions streamlined, and also delegating some of those decisions where you have people in place that you can trust to make sound business decisions on your behalf. And that all starts with making sure that you're hiring the right people going forward. I will say that making good decisions, regardless of whether you're a business owner or whether you're an employee, Peter Drucker summed it up as making good decisions is a crucial skill at every level of an organization. So be sure to develop your decision-making skills as you go along in your career or in your business. So let's talk about the cost of a bad decision. Those costs, you can make one decision that could bankrupt your company. You could make one bad decision of choosing the wrong marital partner that could bankrupt you. You could make one wrong decision in terms of who you choose to associate with. You could choose a vendor who is unethical, who's just there to take your money and snow you with the information they're providing you. So it's really important to understand that one bad decision can have a ripple effect, not only in terms of financial, but also in terms of the impact it's going to have on the team that surrounds you. And we'll delve a little bit into this. So let's talk about the different types of decisions. Obviously, there's the financial cost aspect of things. There's also the reputation damage. You make a bad decision and it impacts your business, your reputation of your business, you're done. That's really hard to recover from and almost impossible to recover from in some cases. Also in terms of wasted resources. It is documented that Fortune 500 companies lose approximately $250 million annually due to inefficient decision-making processes, which is really underscoring the impact of poor decisions. And so if businesses don't have frameworks in place in terms of having consistency in how decisions are made, they start doing off the cuff, or one person is the only person making the decision. And if there's only one person making a decision, it's based on their sphere of knowledge and maybe insufficient knowledge to make a good judgment call. And then also in terms of profit erosion, it is reported that it's a minimum of 3% on your net income. And I think it actually is, I think that's the starting point of a bad decision. I think it can be significantly more than 3%. Obviously, some companies make bad decisions and then they're paying off loans and the interest rates. And then because they have this huge mountain of debt in their business, their debt to equity ratio is so bad that they don't have enough resources in terms of expanding the business and growing the business and hiring the right people. And so it's just this very slippery slope to the bottom. So again, ensuring that you're using the right frameworks and the right decision making and talking to experts. You don't have to know it all. And guess what? You don't. You don't know it all. You have to consult with the right people, but ensure that you're consulting with people you trust to give you the right information, not just people you like. It has to be people that truly do have the ability to help you. Data quality. So many organizations may have frameworks in place to make these decisions, but they have poor data. And so they're making decisions on poor data. And it's the old saying from the IT space of garbage in, garbage out. So if you've got garbage information going into your systems for collecting data and you're making decisions based on that data, you're making bad decisions. So it all starts, go back to the root cause in terms of how you're collecting the data, what data you're collecting, and what data you're using, and how that data is analyzed to ensure that you are making proper decisions. The annual losses for poor quality data is estimated at 15 million, annual losses of 15 million. I think that's very conservative. I know many companies that I have consulted with in the Fortune 500 space. When I was out consulting for 20 years, I can tell you the impact was far greater than 15 million. So I think that's quite a conservative number. So what are some of the reasons why people make poor decisions? And it really starts with, think of your day today. You've started out and you've had how many people asking you to make decisions? They could be little ones, they could be medium-sized ones, they could be monumental decisions. But at a certain point, you have this constant distractions of you're moving from one subject to the next within your business. These constant distractions create fatigue. Having too many decisions to make as well causes decision fatigue. And so that certainly has an impact on your ability to make good decisions, because at a certain point, when you're tired and you've just made so many decisions that you should have delegated or automated, that you don't have the bandwidth to make the important decisions that you should be making. I know that speaks to hierarchical management, but I'm a firm believer in hierarchical management. I follow the Elliott-Jacques theory of hierarchy management because it provides structure in terms of how decisions can be made in your business. And speaking of structure, that also ties to governance, which is about having the right rules and policies and procedures and the legality of compliance that you're following in your business. Very, very important. And so one of the things that they've identified is that there is a drop in your decision-making capability by at least 40% if you are making too many decisions in the day. So learn to delegate, learn to automate. And also in terms of, right now it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and I've been going nonstop since 7 a.m. this morning. I'm tired. And I'm sure you are as well if you're watching this at this time of day. So it's statistically proven that you should not be making business decisions after 3 o'clock. And the old adage of saying, let me sleep on that decision, is a very wise point of view, so that you ensure that you're thinking this through, you have the soak time of the information that you've received, and that not every decision has to be instantaneous. And that's one thing as entrepreneurs, we do like to make decisions fast and move on to the next thing. Some do, some are more methodical, and I encourage you to, if you are a fast decision maker, take the time not to make the decision after 3 o'clock. That's why board meetings are typically in the morning, because those are very important and critical decisions being made by a board of directors to ensure that they're not tired when they're at the board meeting and their mind is thinking about all the things they've had to deal with all day long. So it's about ensuring that they're in the best space mentally to make the right decisions as well. And so I encourage you to ensure that when you are making these important decisions that you're fresh, as opposed to at the end of the day when you're just like a wilting flower. So also, I already talked about the misrepresentation of data. And one of the things I learned when I did my management science course, when I did my MBA, is that data can be manipulated to make it look any way you want it to. So again, trusting you've got good data, you've got the core of your data is good, and trusting that the person who is presenting the data is using good judgment and that you've set up the right parameters of how you're analyzing data. They say numbers don't lie, but you can make numbers look the way you want them to if you position things the right way. But the astute business owner will be sure to look beyond the surface and make sure that they're using good data to make those decisions. So our brains, just as an interesting point, our brains are processing 5 times more data than we did in 1986. So yes, the information age has provided a lot more information for us to make better decisions. The question is, are we using the right data, and are we using our brain the right way at the right time so that we're not making bad decisions? So in terms of decision making statistics, quality decisions can have an uplift for your business of to 10 to 20%. Again, I think that's conservative, because if you can make some really good business decisions, you could double your business, you could even more than that. But it's about using good judgment. And it all comes down to good judgment and ensuring that you're having the right framework to utilize the information and the decision-making process. That includes who's involved and how you come to the conclusions that you need to come to. Okay, so we've already talked about the cost of poor decisions, and the unwise choices can lead to financial losses. I've touched a little bit on the solvency of your business. I have seen small businesses that got themselves into trouble. They bought all kinds of marketing. They spent tens of thousands of dollars in marketing, tens of thousands of dollars in technology, but they didn't do the right decision in terms of evaluating where their business should be and whether their business would even have the hope of continuing. So then they had this debt load, and there are many businesses out there that are just managing based on cash flow, and they're bankrupt, but they haven't said uncle yet. And it's because the many decisions that have led up to it. And guess what? It's not one decision that leads to that situation. It's a multitude of decisions that just take you down a path. And it's being able to make the hard decisions to change course soon enough to avoid that situation. And that really involves talking to experts. Make sure you talk to the people who truly know what they're doing and are trusted advisors. Going back to the old statement of trusted advisors, I know I just dated myself from 2000, but not to underplay that too much, because if you don't trust your advisors, or you're not employing trusted advisors giving you good legal advice, giving you good tax advice, giving you good IT advice, cybersecurity advice, all of these areas, even advice in your business sphere that you're operating in, it takes a village, is what I'm trying to say. So don't isolate yourself and not deploy resources available. And that's one thing we're so fortunate to have in our country here, is the resources available to us to help us grow our business. It's out there. You just have to seek it and not be shy about doing so. Investment decision tools, even financial advisors use investment tools to ensure that they're making the right decisions. Don't be shy about doing that. If you don't know how to use them, get people who do. Get the experts involved. Long-term financial performance, you really have to evaluate your strategic plan, that one, your business is relevant and that it has the opportunity to succeed and provide the right value to the marketplace. Going back to what's your value proposition, and a lot of people struggle with that in terms of, well, what is my value proposition? And it's really about the service or the product that you're providing. How is that providing value to the person who is paying you for it? And if you're not providing value, you're not going to be in business very long. So, and again, using your decision making, that maybe you need to pivot. Think of companies like Kodak, for example. They did not make a good business decision strategically. Another one could be Blockbuster. They made a decision not to partner with Netflix. I bet the man and the group of men or women involved in that decision making have been kicking themselves and just putting their head down and shaking, going, oh my God. So we all make bad decisions as well. So that's part of life and part of the learning lesson. Just hope there aren't too many of them and not too expensive in terms of those bad decisions. So ensure that you're getting that long-term focus in terms of your strategic plan and the strategies you're deploying. And I implore everyone to ensure that the decisions you're making are good, ethical decisions, because if we're not living with ethics and operating with ethics, it's only a matter of time that that's going to catch up with you. So I encourage you to follow that. And they say that there is a 95% predictive correlation, so management science there for the mathematic folks out there, correlation with poor performance in terms of underscoring the role of bad decisions in your organization. So let's talk about executive dissatisfaction. So taking it out of the small business sphere, or even it could be impacting medium-sized businesses or large businesses. We often hear employees don't leave companies, they leave managers. Well, that's because it's about people. And often what's happening is those managers are also dissatisfied, or the executives are dissatisfied. And what causes that dissatisfaction often is how decisions get made in an organization. If it's one person always has the influence or making the decision, that can be problematic. And ironically, most people are not asking during the interview process, how did decisions get made in this company? Because if you don't know that going in, and you don't find out until you're in, and you don't agree with the decision-making process, not the decisions, but the decision-making process, you're never going to be happy there. And oddly enough, a lot of managers and a lot of executives aren't comfortable with making decisions because they're looking at the long-term impact on their career. And I've seen it in large corporations when I've gone in consulting to these large organizations where you have the career folks, is what I call them. They're there to stay as long as they can, do enough work that keeps them on the team, but also doesn't have them stand out. Because if they stand out, it's like whack-a-mole. And so no one wants to be in the whack-a-mole hole. So, at least not the one getting hit. So the point is that a lot of them, 75% of executives feel unprepared to make decisions. And so that tells me that these executives aren't given the right information, may not be given the information in a timely manner. So if the executives are unhappy with the decision making, middle management's got to feel even more frustrated because they're seeing a lack of alignment at the executive level because the executives don't agree with the decision making process. So that's just going to trickle down throughout an organization. That leads us back to governance. And so governance is about policies and procedures and how the organization operates. How are you keeping the organization operating to make good decisions and providing those guardrails to keep them on the straight and narrow? There may be a few curves in the road, but keeping them on the straight and narrow. And believe it or not, if you're a CEO, 63% of your executives are already thinking of resigning. Sad number, but that means you need to address how decisions get made in the organization, and do you have that collaboration in terms of the collection of data, the information, and how it moves forward. So on that note, let's go into section 2, which is probably where a lot of you are interested. And again, I will preface this, I am not a lawyer. So if you need further consult on this, please talk to your lawyer on this. I'm just providing information that may be helpful to tweak some thought processes for you. So some common legal misconceptions can be very costly. So what often happens in business is a lot of companies, people start out with their business, they don't incorporate. And so not every company needs to incorporate, but you do need to ensure that if you want to protect your personal assets, you do need to incorporate. And again, I encourage you to consult with a lawyer about that. An accountant is going to advise you in terms of the cost, in terms of the financial records, where a lawyer is going to tell you in terms of your personal liability and the impact it's going to have on you as an individual and you as a business. So talk to the experts. Also in terms of copyright, I've heard it said, which I thought was humorous, is that it's not plagiarism if it's from more than one source, it's research. And that violates copyright laws. So ensure the material you're using, you're not violating any copyright. That also includes trademark, and trademarks and copyright are definitely a legal process and far more involved than what I'm going to get into today. So I just caution you to be cognizant of the risk that you would be taking. And it goes again back to ethics. The other thing is misconception, employment doesn't apply to my small business. I grew up in Eastern Ontario and left and came back about 12 years ago. And I was amazed at the thought process and how different it was here from what I've experienced throughout North America. And what I've seen here is a lot of small businesses say, oh, we're a small town, it doesn't apply to us, don't worry about it. They're never going to come to our place. They're never going to come to our business to investigate us. I don't need to worry about employment laws. I'm the big dog in town. That guy isn't going to be bothering me and I don't have to worry about that. Wrong. Employment law applies to every business, whether you're a sole proprietor, big business, small business, it doesn't matter. You have to comply with Employment Standards Act here in Ontario. You must also ensure that you're following under the Income Tax Act. So on that point, if you are buying into a business, due diligence should include whether or not that business has two things up to date. One is, what is their liability for source deductions? Because even if you go out of business, even if you go bankrupt, you are still liable for those source deductions. If you buy into the business or you become a board of director, you are also liable for those source deductions. The same applies for HST. There's also employment liability in terms of you have long-term employees. They have severance liability. When you're evaluating a business, evaluate the severance liability. That if you need to let some long-term employees go because they're just not moving forward with the business, there's a cost associated with that. So there's, again, some legal myths and also some good business decisions you need to make along the way. I've also seen health and safety regulations. When I first came back to this area, I saw an employee get into the front of a front end loader and put something in there, held onto it, got into it, while the other guy drove it. And I was just like, oh my God. I said, oh, don't worry about it. We're a small town. No one's going to see us back here doing this. Wrong. I just saw you. So that's a problem. So ensuring that you're meeting the health and safety regulations. And guess what? That also includes occupational health and safety. A lot of employers do not realize how important occupational health and safety is. If you have an employee and it's a woman, or it could be a man as well, but I'm going to use in this case a woman, and she is being physically hurt or mentally hurt, you as an employer, if you're made aware of that, you have a legal responsibility to protect that employee even outside of business. I had an employee tell me that her husband was really beating on her for a decision, and I said, stop. Can you explain what you're saying? Because as soon as she said that, I now had to engage to ensure that we were protecting her. And so your obligations as an employer do not end at the end of the business day when your employees go home. So this is where read up on your Occupational Health and Safety Act to ensure what you're responsible for to ensure the protection of your employees. And yes, that is costly. I had to move an employee into a hotel room to get her protection and then get her situated in an apartment in a safe place and get her the resources to help her move forward. So don't underestimate what your liability is there. So this will be shared with everyone as part of the deck that's going out, and I'm not going to go through all 12 of these, but these are some common misconceptions. My friend's business strategy will work for me. Maybe, not likely, because you're not your friend. Your friend's strengths may not be your strengths. One is I can wait to think about intellectual property. Wrong. If there's infringement on your intellectual property or you're infringing on someone else's, again, you're exposing yourself to civil procedures. So encourage you not to do that. A lawyer is only needed when there's a problem. To address that, if that's when only time you're going to see a lawyer, you are going to spend a lot of money you don't need to. It's better if you consult a lawyer ahead of time to ensure that you're avoiding legal pitfalls, ensuring that you are protecting yourself and protecting your business and the financial viability of your business by making sure that you're setting things up correctly, ensuring that you're protecting intellectual property. When I did my MBA, I was told, if I remember nothing else coming out of the MBA program, is there are two people that you should always have as your advisors, and never go cheap, or if you do go cheap, make sure they really know what they're doing, is a good lawyer and a good tax accountant. Because if you get those two working together with you, it is going to save you a ton of money avoiding pitfalls and tax situations. I've had tax accountants tell me that business owners have shown up in their offices and it is a tax quagmire that they have to try and unravel. But had they have gone to the trouble of consulting the experts up front, it would have saved the business, it would have structured the business properly, and it would have ensured that all the accounting that they had to redo and pay for and spend tens of thousands of dollars to fix things could have been avoided if they had just consulted the legal expert as well as the tax expert. So invest wisely. It's my best advice for that. Spend the money, it's worth every penny. So, making good decisions. I think we've talked about personal liability in terms of if you're not incorporated, you are personally liable. And guess what? If you close your business, even if you're incorporated, it doesn't mean the liability stops. There is continued liability even after you close your business. And HST is one of the few things and source deductions you have to pay, even if you go bankrupt, even if you close your business, you are still liable for those. So understand what your liabilities are. Tax consequences, I think I beat that one to death. Funding and investment, if you're incorporated, it opens up a bigger world of funding and grants and loans through various agencies for your business. If you're not incorporated, a lot of those doors aren't available to you. So that's another thing to consider. Operational efficiency. Again, going back to the structure of your business, how you operate as a business, whether you're having multiple businesses under a holding company. If you have your business structured as a numbered company, there's a connotation that you're hiding something if you structure a business with a numbered company. So come up with a name and put it through the nuance system to ensure that you're protecting your name. The other thing is to ensure that you register your business. If you're going to operate across Canada, you need to have your business registered nationally versus just provincially. And again, you need to consult a lawyer and a tax accountant to ensure that you are compliant in both of those areas. It also provides, by having an incorporation, there's the connotation or the perception that you're legitimate as well. So it does provide that credibility and professionalism to your business. And the other aspect of this is that you can set up for continuity and succession planning with your shareholders' agreements, and with business continuity, if you're a sole proprietor, then the value of that business will then transfer to your family within that estate, assuming you have a will. If you don't have a will, get a will. It's worth the $500, or even if it's $1,000, to have a personal will and a secondary will, which is for your business. If you're a sole proprietor, if you're not a sole proprietor or professional, and you're incorporated, then your shareholders agreement will take care of your business, but it all ties back to your business continuity and your succession planning. Okay, now we're going to get into the tools to help you use making these decisions, not only for you as business owners, but also for your employees, to ensure that they're helping your business. Because remember, you're delegating to your team to make better business decisions. So let's talk about decision weight. And that gets back to understanding the implications of the decisions you're making. Are those decisions worth your time to make, or are those the decisions you should delegate? Whether or not they're going to shape the future of your company. So if it's a strategic decision, yeah, it is. If it's, am I ordering blue pens instead of red this week? Let someone else make that. And I know that's an oversimplification, but it's knowing what decisions you want to push down the line. Executive pressure. Senior executives are constantly faced with the problem of having to make decisions quickly. And if you remember earlier, I said, if you can avoid making a decision on the spot and you have the luxury of thinking it through, it depends on the significance of the decision. Obviously, some decisions like, yeah, do this. But it's really understanding the implications of the decision. And some executives will make a decision like this, and then it comes back around, well, you weren't aware of X, Y, and Z. And I've seen that happen in consulting engagements where I've seen an executive say, well, please make sure you have all the tariffs loaded into the software, and it brought international global transportation companies invoicing to a screeching halt, because he said he wanted every tariff that was out there on the system. And so the algorithms that were trying to do the invoicing and the billing, like calculating the rates, were having to go through all these permutations. And so I was there to figure out why the system wasn't working. And when I discovered that he had made the decision to do this, and I presented to him and I said, okay, we've come up with why this is happening and why when you should be billing 10,000 invoices a night and you're billing 3 is because someone has uploaded all these rates and tariffs. And he said, well, who was that idiot that made that decision? And I had to say, I'd like to tell you privately. And he goes, I don't care. I want everyone to know who made this decision. And I thought, are you sure? He said, yes. And I said, well, sir, it was you. You told the staff to do this. And because you made that decision, they're not going to say no to you. They're just going to comply and do. And that decision ground this global transportation company to a halt. For 7 days, they weren't able to invoice. And so there was a lot of catch up to do. So needless to say, he says, well, whoever made that decision should be fired. And I said, not my area. Good luck with it. So definitely executive pressure. Also in terms of risk assessment, that really requires looking at multitudes of information, both internally, externally, in terms of your risk profile, your risk assessment of your business, the risk assessment of hiring an individual. We've all made hiring mistakes. I've made a hiring mistake in my career, and it was one that I still to this day regret, and it cost dearly. And so even if you're a small business and you say, oh yeah, that'll be fine, well, if it doesn't work out, we'll just fire him, he's on probation. Wrong. Yes, that's true, you can just fire someone who's on probation. However, that can cost you disruption with your team, it can cause a disruption with your clients, it can cause disruption with your reputation. So it's critical that your hiring decisions are made with a full spectrum of the risk assessment of the individual that you're looking at hiring. So don't take hiring decisions lightly is what I'm trying to say. They're absolutely essential. The impact of errors. There's a ripple effect in organizations. So for the example I gave of the company, the credibility of that executive not understanding how algorithms worked within the software solution certainly impacted his credibility in that organization moving forward. So I didn't follow on after to see how long he lasted. I didn't want to know after that. Strategic consequences. Again, making decisions. Companies have missions, visions, values, and people just say, oh, that's just something on the wall. Wrong. If that's what your organization has is shelfware or just something splattered on, then you've got the wrong mission, you've got the wrong vision, and the wrong values set up for your organization. The mission is about why you exist, which ties to the value of your company that it's delivering to your market. Your vision is where you want to see the organization evolve to, so that you can inspire your customers to purchase your product, investors, your employees, to engage your employees. If you don't have a vision, you're never going to engage employees. And your values are all about how you operate. If you do not have really well thought through values, and you don't govern your decisions based on the values of your organization, it's going to come back and bite you. There's no question. And I really think your values should be tied into your governance as well. And I hear a lot of people say governance, but a lot of people don't know what it is. They hear the term and just say, oh, okay, it just means I have to follow the government. No, it's more than that. Governance is about ensuring you have the right policies, procedures, and structures, and understanding the regulations that impact your business. I was consulting in one business, and they had environmental laws they had to comply with. They had the Highway Traffic Act. It was just a multitude of acts that were impacting the operations of this business. Or organization rather, it was an organization, not a business. And so understanding the implications of all of this, and that's a lot of information that you have to have. And guess what? It's always changing. So, I know business owners are like, how can I stay on top of all of this? I'm tired. I'm having to run the business. I'm having to deal with customers. I'm trying to be involved in the community to be socially responsible. And then I've got all of this that I also have to know. So for those of you out there who are entrepreneurs or executives, my hat goes off to you, because it is a lot. And kudos to you for navigating all of that, because it's not easy. There's a lot you have to process and be responsible for. So, when you're making decisions, are you able to properly assess the situation? That really comes down to understanding the risks, the loss, and the probabilities of things happening. We can take, I was going to say the political election, but no, I'm staying away from politics, because the probabilities on that, I have to say, I was quite nervous on election night. I was like, oh God. But, and I'm sure even in the US, the probabilities of elections. So that's all I'm going to say about politics. Looking at it from a business standpoint is understanding what's the likelihood of this becoming a risk. I know, for example, municipalities have to look at their sidewalk plowing is a great example. They have to assess what's their risk assessment in terms of if somebody slips and falls, in terms of when they have to have the sidewalks plowed. So it's the balance of how much do I invest to keep them clear when they're cleared versus my risk assessment. So I know that's off the topic subject, but it's a good example of measuring risk. I should talk about this in terms of risk and loss is regarding the entitlement or endowment effect. People put more value into things simply because they own them. You see that with when people buy cars. Well, BMWs are the best cars because I'm driving one. Where the next person would say, well, I'm a Mercedes gal, or I'm a Lexus person, or whatever the case may be. So they put more value in that product because they own it. And that's going to be the same for you with your business. You're going to put more value in that, but that's going to put you at risk perhaps not being objective enough in your decision making. Also, the resistance to change. Long-term employees or even some new employees who've been in the business a long time they're reticent to embrace change. People don't like change. I personally love change, but because I always look at it, it's about things getting better. I go on the positive side of change as opposed to the negative, so I guess it's all about perspective. The sunk cost fallacy. Staying in an unhappy relationship because I've been here for 20 years. I've got all this time invested and the whole upheaval, I'll just put up with it for another 10 years. Framing effect happens when the information is presented to influence decisions. That goes back to what I said about manipulating information, making sure the person who's presenting the information is presenting it as objectively as possible and within including the attributes and the variations that you want in the analysis, and making sure you understand how they came to those conclusions. So good judgment, the overconfident bias, you see that all the time. Oh, I know everything. I'm sure none of you have come across know-it-alls. They're the most annoying people. They're overconfident, they think they know the decision, but they don't have all the information. But then it's like, oh, well, yes, it should be this way. And totally discounting the fact that they made the wrong decision in the first place. That just annoys me. Groupthink. Just because everyone thinks that things should be this way. I'm trying to avoid the political one. For example, you've got everyone on the team that's against a particular person because it's going to impact them negatively as a team, and so they collaborate together saying, okay, we'll get rid of this person because we don't want things to change. So that groupthink can impact your business negatively, and guess what? You can be right and be the majority of one. So it goes back to good judgment, ethics, and the right decision. Information processing, this is about, I beat this to death in terms of data, good data in anchoring your bias as well and how you analyze data. So getting back to what parameters you use to analyze the data, and the halo effect in terms of, I've seen organizations where Scott is so smart. Scott's the greatest guy in the world. Scott thinks this is the way we have to go, and I apologize to any Scotts out there. I'm just picking a name, and because Scott has the halo effect. But guess what? Scott could be dead wrong because he doesn't have the right information. Somebody could have withheld information from him, so he would fall flat on his face. So I've seen that happen in consulting engagements as well. It's really ugly. So I've talked about Netflix. Some successful business decisions with Netflix is, if you have Netflix, which most of us do, they're using AI as a decision framework in terms of the data decisions that they're using to make business decisions, what content they're pushing to you. Amazon also does that in terms of they use working backwards. That another way of saying that is regression analysis. What do you want the end state to be? And then what are the decisions you have to make along the way to get to that end state? Kensington Brewing Company is a small brewing company in Toronto, in Kensington Market, and they use the lean decision-making process, and they use that to ensure that their operating costs are kept within control, and that's how they make good business decisions. So define the core issue, understand the context and the constraints of the problem, understand the decision alignment within your organization, understand the strategic risk assessment, and guess what? Only 36% of the executives feel that their decision-making style aligns with the organization's approach. As executives, get aligned, because if you're not aligned, you're going to have dissension, you're going to have people torpedoing or leaving your organization and costing you even more money. So ensure that you're using structured decision frameworks. Ensure that you have continuous performance evaluation, not only just of your people, but of your products, of your marketing, of every area of your business. And ensure you've got that cross-functional collaboration, because someone else has that piece of information that you don't know about. Also, in terms of your analytical approaches, use your intuition, because like I said earlier, your gut feeling, your inklings, they are based on learned behaviors, learned decisions, learned good and bad decisions. And adopt scenario planning. So ensure that you're pulling all of this information together and having some situational awareness internally and externally. So I'm going to leave you with these. I'm not going through all of them. I've pretty much covered all of them throughout this conversation today, but these are the essential strategies to improve your decision making. And I implore you to really think through what framework you're using, and also ask within your organization how they're making decisions. If you're interviewing for a job, understand how they're making decisions as well. And then understand the cost of the bad decision, address your legal misconceptions, implement your effective decision making, learn from the people that are doing it right and are successful, and then protect your business legally. So I'm going to leave you on that note and say thank you, and I hope it was a good decision to listen in today. Thank you very much.